This is Pi. Pi is a dynamic phase rotator. It's not well understood. I'm going to try to help with that. The dots represent the different instruments in the track. For example, here the bass is the pink dot. Their position indicates their overall correlation to each other. We'll look at that later. Here it is in use. In this case it's subtle, but it's pulling the bass back into phase on notes where it's cancelling with the kick. This can be hard to hear, so to illustrate the problem Pi seeks to solve, here's a kick and snare pattern over a sine wave bass line. As I play this through, you'll hear that against the kick, the first sub-bass note is very slightly louder than the second one, although I guarantee they all went in at exactly the same level. The first kick and bass hit are in phase with each other, and we can see that if we measure the output, they sum together to minus 11.8 dB. If we repeat that on the second hit, they only sum to minus 12.4 dB. So we've lost some level. This is because of destructive interference. But with an instance of Pi engaged, the problem's fixed. When you sum signals together, if the peaks line up with each other, as in this case, they sum constructively and you get more output. This relationship's frequency dependent, and if you change the frequency, then the relative position of the peaks and troughs changes. So sometimes they line up, sometimes they're somewhere in between, and sometimes they cancel. A peak lines up with a trough. You can manipulate the relative phase between two signals using polarity inversion or using delay. However, you can also manipulate the phase of a signal using phase rotation. Here's the sawtooth wave undergoing phase rotation. You'll notice it still sounds the same, but the waveform looks very different. So to understand what it is that Pi is doing here, I've got an example using a couple of test tones. I've got a sawtooth wave, which is represented by a blue dot, and a sine wave, which is represented by a yellow dot. And these two waves are very slightly detuned against each other, so you get that characteristic beating like when you're tuning a guitar. This is because the two waves constructively and then destructively sum together. They're falling in and out of phase with each other in a regular and repeating way. There we can see the rotation of the phase relationship between the two signals. 12 o'clock strongly in phase, 6 o'clock strongly out of phase, and then we have a full rotation in between those points. We'll see there's a mutual disagreement in phase terms between those two signals. Pi can fix that. If I bring Pi into play, both signals become strongly in phase with each other. Pi's doing that by rotating the phase of the signals against each other. We can have a look at what that looks like by printing the output. If we zoom in, we can see that we've got an ordinary sawtooth wave where Pi wasn't engaged, but where Pi was engaged, we've got a sawtooth wave that's undergoing phase rotation with a constantly changing wave shape. So that's what Pi is doing. It's rotating the phase on a dynamic basis according to what pushes the summed signal furthest into phase. It's all very well listening to test tones, but what does Pi do for music? Here's an example of a piano recorded with a spaced pair of microphones, and between the mics there are some phasing issues. Pi is an interesting plugin. It's not the easiest to understand, however, because it's a dynamic process as opposed to things like auto-align, which can help with static phase issues on related tracks, this dynamically changes what it does depending on what's needed to alleviate the issue. And as such, it offers something unique. Download a free demo of Pi and experiment with it on your mixes. For more information, visit soundradix.com.